Yeah. So I talked about most of these core capabilities of DocumentDB in terms of the value proposition. But how is all of this happening outside of the global distribution aspect of it is, there's actually a VLDB paper on this. This is how DocumentDB initially originated. So the algorithm actually enables you to have a schema agnostic indexing. Every document as we ingest, you can override if you want to for reason. Every document that you ingest, we actually index it. So you don't have to think about, a global scale, thinking about, hey, how do I actually order my table and create an index? This is how we are able to provide that low latency capability that we talked and showed you about. And there's no noisy neighbor problem. It's completely fully resource governed all the way in terms of, the rate limiting, whatever is the throughput that you ask for, it's actually built all the way into the log structure engine, so you don't have to worry about, like, hey, if I have somebody else that is that's actually a more hungry workload, how is it going to impact me? Online index building, offline index building, you don't have to worry about all of that. They're all online and built. I'll just use an example. I didn't want to. Oh man, this is my last-minute slide. I'll just show an example in terms of what happens when you actually insert a document. As you can see, when I'm actually doing the insert over there, this is the insert path. That's when we actually index the document. They are partitioned, so it decides which partition to actually insert the document. And when it's doing, number two is it's automatically indexing, and as long as the quorum within a particular region is it's returned to the quorum, we actually return and say, look, we are able to actually write it. Now, based on what what you are setting for that account is from a consistency standpoint, defines how many quorums we write. But we write it in enough quorums so that there is no data loss. Now, what you see in the response is this XMS request charge 8.57 that basically says for that particular query, it actually took 8.57 request units per second. So if you really don't know, we have a capacity planner, or I don't know what it's called, request unit RU calculator, I forget the name, sorry. If you go there and you take your sample document and you actually put it in there, it will tell you what is the RU that you require for such a document. So a whole lot of planning is done from that standpoint. Because what an RU is, and it's an abstraction of the compute unit, that your database requires. So in terms of I/O, in terms of memory, in terms of CPU, we abstract and say, hey, here is what is required. So for a 1 KB document, how much one read is what an RU defines. Yeah, just building my stuff. So in terms of richness of the queries, so JavaScript is the type system of the database engine. Like, if you've heard about this.
Just because you're kind of moving on, I was going to wait to see.
Yeah.
One of the questions was, what's one of the trade-offs? And I found one of the hardest trade-offs was with choosing my indexing strategy. I forget what it's called, but integer ordering versus, textual ordering.
So yeah,
and it's like an upfront decision that you have to make about an entire collection where you may want to store heterogeneous documents. It's like, that makes it really hard. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so we can. So by default, we support 3 kind of indexes: hash, range, and spatial. Okay, and we did a good thing. I don't know whether you noticed recently. We basically default to range indexing. Why? Because range indexing can do what hash indexing can do. Hash indexing is used for equality queries. This equal to that, string equal to this, and all those kind of things. Range will help you do greater than, equal to, in between. So range by default will do everything. So just don't worry about. By default, actually, when we create a collection, and I'll walk you through, we will ensure that you have range index, so you don't have to fiddle around with it. Never. Because we want to take away that pain. And I'll come to that. Spatial, if you give us GeoJSON data, we'll read it. You don't have to tell us. We'll read it and we'll index it. Okay? You don't have to do anything. There is only one small part there, which we used to expose earlier, which is called precision. Precision is nothing but how much bits that we require to store that index information. Just leave it at -1, we will take care of it. Okay? So because the idea is like, okay, we tried to expose that and said, there might be some folks, very heavy folks who have a lot of time to look at all the pieces like Shyam, and they will modify it. Then we found out that people are like me. They would rather go with, okay, I have kids to attend to in the evening. Will the system take care for me?
Yes.
So that's what.
Yeah. So the one there is geospatial, right?
Yes.
If I have addresses that are part of my customer, documents, how do I do? Is there any way to benefit from? Do I have to put them in a separate collection?
So you don't have to put it in a separate collection. In the same collection,
Yeah.
if you give us that format, if you follow the JSON, we will index it.
Okay.
You don't have to create a separate collection.
Okay.
Because then we are passing on the burden to you, right? We don't want to do that. So if you give us GeoJSON, we will index it. So there was one more question.
Yeah, the previous slide,
Yeah.
you quickly talked about it's partitioned.
Yes.
What's your partitioning algorithm? How do
Great.
how do you go about that?
Okay, so what happens is, as Shyam mentioned earlier, by default, DocumentDB is a distributed system. What do I mean by that is, when you give us data, we want to distribute it for read scalability, for write scalability. How do we do that? We use something called as a partitioning key, and I'll show you a little later on. So in this case, it's very simple. All the data which comes through, let us say we choose city, which is one of the parts in the JSON, as the partitioning key. Let us say all of the A to G, they will remain in one partition. H to K will remain in one partition, and so on and so forth. So this is, how do we do that? We basically use hash partitioning. So very specifically, it's not physical mapping, it's a hash partitioning.
So you can set that up and,
In the beginning,
okay.
In the beginning, I'll just show you.
So you need to be careful and consider not keeping your partitions lopsided by
Yes,
So the biggest, I think
If
I
I
was
know-
going to say with the question, the indexing one, I think the biggest thing that you have to think about when you are using DocumentDB is your partitioning strategy. And we actually have documentation and we can help through it. That's something that we can't automatically take care of because we don't know your application. But that's the one thing that you really need to think about. A good partitioning strategy enables you to get all the benefits that we talked about. Sorry, I skipped over that. I had that here. Trying to look at the clock and make sure. So we talked about this in terms of, somebody asked about ACID transactions and snapshot isolation. We actually do JavaScript language integrated. You can do multi-item ACID transaction using snapshot and isolation. You can use query using SQL and JavaScript, or as I said, we have actually Andy back there. He just came from work. I think he's been working on trying to get Mongo out there. We already are in preview. We have a lot of customer growth from customers who are using Mongo to talk to DocumentDB, and learned a lot, and we have made a lot more improvements, and that should be generally available within the next couple of weeks. I don't want any date, but the next couple of weeks. And one of the ways we look at this is, if you're the frameworks you work on, the tools that you have, you should just work with DocumentDB. Think about it as I said, a fully managed instance. There was a question earlier, we covered many of this, I'm going quickly. The question earlier in terms of, I think from an IoT scenario standpoint, so there's a pattern that we have talked about. I can provide more details about it. You could use DocumentDB. There are customers actually using it for ingestion and then run processing on top of the compute processing on top of the particular data, and then you can query using DocumentDB itself. So you don't need, you can just use DocumentDB for the Lambda pattern. We released aggregates. So aggregates have all the benefits that you get from a globally distributed database like DocumentDB that we talked about. This is something that I thought somebody would actually bring that as a gap. It's something that we are enabling. Aggregates will be available even for MongoDB. So from that standpoint, So quickly, if you're familiar with it, I won't talk about this. Everybody knows what a DocumentDB resource model is, just in terms of what you work on. Anybody? No? Okay. So at a very quick glance, what you create in Azure is a DocumentDB account. A DocumentDB account can contain multiple databases. A database is a construct more or less in terms of holding users and permissions. And then where you really store your data is in collections. You can have multiple collections, and then collections can have stored procedures, triggers, and user-defined functions using JavaScript. And then collections will contain the documents. And documents can actually, if you have blog, you can actually have attachments, links to the documents. If you create a database account and you associate it with a number of regions, as we talked about before, you actually will have the collections and documents and everything replicated across to all the regions.
So just to clarify, the documents, when you say is JSON document.
Just a JSON document.
And the attachments are.
That is the, like if you talked about a SharePoint, if they did it, they would actually use us for, I think it's called a central database, I don't know what it's called, it's a config database or something.
Yeah.
And then the content for SharePoint would actually be using attachments if they were using this. We will get a better name. You're reminding me. So
attachments are not indexed.
that's correct.
Yes,
That's
yes,
correct.
yes.
Again, that's just a depiction of a tenant can have a number of accounts, a number of databases, and you can use ARM and you can provision, you can talk to DocumentDB from the center. Let's actually provide a quick overview of our viewpoint. And I talked about the history of why we started doing this. We have still a consistent and strong viewpoint. And you talked about this. We used to differentiate NoSQL databases using the model, right? Dynamo, everybody used to talk about Dynamo as a key value store. Right? Tables is a key value store, Dynamo is a key value store. We were a document store. If you go and read about documentations on Dynamo, you will find Dynamo is a document store. You can store documents in it. Mongo was a document store, they store BSONs. Mongo is a key value store. Similarly, DocumentDB also is like, the way you look at these databases from a data model standpoint, we consider is obsolete. It isn't, because any of these data models can be supported in any one of them. Look at any of the NoSQL databases. You want graph, you can do graph. You want document, you can do document. You want key value, you can do key value. Talking about these three because if you look at the market, these three constitute about 80 to 90% of the scenarios for NoSQL databases. The way we look at it is, it's generally a trade-off between few things in terms of scale and distribution. Can you scale up or just scale out? Availability guarantees and in terms of how easy is it to program. Latency and durability. I mean, you can have fast latency. I talked about there are database vendors who would say, hey, second latency, but whether your data will be there, there's no guarantee about it. Transaction, can you do multi-unit transactions, and what is the scale with respect to that? Do you provide flexibility in terms of schema-less? You don't need to worry about schema, etc. But can I get fast query performance? Can I run a multi-tenant database, but at the same time to make it cheaper for you? But do you get the performance isolation? So our viewpoint, and again, this is now I'll think of my engineering thing and just talk about from a product PM hat is, look, our view is these are the trade-offs that you have to make, and with DocumentDB, to your question, you don't have to make any of these trade-offs. So again, quickly running through this, how are we viewing DocumentDB? What is our actual play? The way we look at this is, look, we have a purposeful or cloud-born distributed database engine that's now catering to, like, just in terms of numbers, over the course of the last 6 months, I won't name, but a whole lot of the internal Microsoft services are actually using DocumentDB. We have grown 700% just internally. We are one of the fastest growing service in Azure. I won't say, I think it's the first or second in terms of utilization and revenue from external. So it's fast growing. And because of the beauty of in terms of what Dharma and team did, Andy actually has been one of the founding guys. He's been an intern here, I think, when they were building it. What the Dharma and team did in terms of actually having an engine that is that can support global distribution and provide you guarantees that we talked about previously. Now our viewpoint beyond that is any kind of NoSQL framework or language that you actually have, you should be able to do it on DocumentDB. Now these are dots because I'm not announcing anything here, and these are the things that we are working on. You could imagine, think about what are the open source frameworks out there that have a lot more popularity. Though we would support that in the future. From an SDKs and tools standpoint, again, that's the openness we are looking at. If there are a set of Mongo drivers that you want to work with Excel and Power BI, you need ODBC. We have ODBC connector. We actually have, we're part of .NET, obviously we have .NET SDK, we are also part of .NET Core. If you want to use mobile applications using Xamarin, or you want to, or I don't know what Xamarin is called now, but Microsoft Visual Studio for Mac, Visual Studio for Mac, I think. You can use that, or you want Node.js drivers, Java, Python, we have support for all of that. And we'll continue to grow this. Some of these actually come from customers asking us for it. For example, we didn't have support for Spring, and we have some large customers who actually said, hey, look, all our applications, we don't want to take a dependency on the SDKs and stuff you have. We will use Spring, can you add support? We added support for it. So we are enabling, sorry, not Storm, we are enabling Spark. I think that goes out as part, very soon along with the MongoDB one. What are we working on? Again, we covered this because as part of some of the questions that came. Encryption at rest. In the course of the next couple of months, this will be rolled out. RU per minute, which is I talked about in terms of how RUs are provisioned per second, but if you have a workload that spreads across a minute, you don't want to actually pay for that, but you can actually use RU per minute. We have had some customers, some of these are customer driven, are actually seeing 73% cost benefit just from provisioning per minute than per second. Again, talked about, there was a question in terms of security and compliance. We will be compliant by all of this by June. That's what we've been working on. Most of these are in audit stage. So let me now, maybe I'll use them because I said as part of this, I'll talk about a few scenarios. I'll go talk about a few scenarios to showcase, make sure there's no name in there. Okay, good. Because I don't have PR from some of these people in terms of to talk about it. I think we are told we can talk about the name. In this case, I don't want to. So this is one of the largest automobile manufacturers. I covered this before. About 250,000 luxury cars are actually emitting data. This was actually sending data to MongoDB. They migrated this particular application from MongoDB to DocumentDB now. The reason they wanted to use DocumentDB is three aspects of it, which is the elasticity that we were providing, the managed service aspect so that they didn't have to worry about from a management overhead, and then fast queries that are coming in terms of to deliver recommended services, safety notices to the vehicles. Like these are real-time transactions where the car is actually getting information from this particular system. This is a live system running with n number of cars. This is a very large car manufacturer. They'll expand beyond their luxury line, and there will be a whole lot more cars that will be touching this.
I'm just taking a guess.
So this is, you can guess this because not many retailers would go to our friends, just because of they compete with them. There's a retailer, I showed this in the graph and I talked about the provision throughput and the low latency aspects of it. So they replaced one of their quote-unquote event stores with DocumentDB, and they are now looking at their entire inventory system and their ordering system. They're trying to move from existing different databases to DocumentDB. This is at peak, they had about 10 million requests. Actually, on Cyber Monday, if I remember correctly, it was 1 billion requests that were that DocumentDB was catering to for that particular event. I don't know if it's 1 billion or more than 2 billion or something large like that. I won't talk much about this. If you're familiar with NextGate, I'm sorry.
I want to go back to that slide on the IoT scenario. So if you use event terms, basically like there is constant real-time data coming in. On the other hand, I have a receiver. Basically, I'm getting streaming data, right? But in case of DocumentDB, how does the real-time data, how does the streaming scenario work? I mean, because
Spark streaming.
okay.
Yeah. So the pattern that I showed with Cheech feed actually uses Spark streaming. So I want to make sure that you're not putting two and two together in terms of that. We can do that versus what that particular customer is doing isn't the same architecture. What that customer doing is slightly different. Next games are very popular. The Walking Dead game was very popular when it released on iPhone, Android, and they were one of our earliest customers in terms of, and many of the learnings we've had, we actually got from them in terms of the global distribution aspects of it. They needed real-time leaderboards for their game, interactive game, and that was actually using DocumentDB, and the benefit of DocumentDB in terms of, and the value of DocumentDB in terms of automatic indexing and the real-time query capabilities actually enabled them. This is a customer, I have the name here too, because they allowed us recently to use. In Australia, they have an active deployment, moved from a, hope I don't have the name of the database there. Yeah, so relational database solution to using DocumentDB. Pretty much they've been live for some time now. Improved reliability, faster order processing, and so to a certain extent, sorry, it's just a joke. What I heard is because the capabilities that these people have now enabled, the franchisers are actually asking them, like this is too good, and it is causing problems for the franchises apparently. what the problem there is. The tech actually solving it for them. So we have a lot of such use cases. We have some of them published. We have trading companies that are using us. We are working with a few financials. The scenario that I talked about, the car manufacturer, is actually used by other companies, like, similar to AAA here. There is a company that provides insurance coverage as well as, a breakdown service in parts of Europe. They are actually using us. We have a company that delivers building materials, and if I go further down, the company which uses trucks and delivery mechanism, that is actually using the same pattern. So we are seeing a lot of repetition of these IoT retail patterns, both internally within Microsoft as well as externally. A whole lot of the Microsoft services, especially interactive services, where you're having users, groups, and messages, etc., are also using DocumentDB.
So what about some reporting scenarios?
Yeah, so so the solution that the IoT scenario actually has a site. There is a reporting scenario to it that uses DocumentDB. The one, I don't have a big case study to talk about. We are actually working with an internal internal organization here, which is actually looking at moving from a purely analytical workload using something else to DocumentDB. That would be the first one that I really know of that is at that scale. We do have a lot of scenarios, not directly reporting, which is customer 360, getting a customer view of. A lot of them, including internal, we have a lot of such scenarios. There's, if you talk about, again, similar to reporting, familiar with Windows Error Reporting or Azure Watson. Azure Watson actually uses DocumentDB. I think we have a published case study on that. And that is, devices, we are talking about billions of devices actually emitting device telemetry, and that's using DocumentDB. We do have, thinking of what I can talk about.
Are you talking about the endpoints like Power BI or?
Yeah.
So Power BI is connected to, we have ODBC connector, and so since we have ODBC, the other visualization tools can also utilize.
Yeah, so we normally do the demo for, we have an ODBC ODBC for Windows. We normally use Tableau and Power BI to show that. We'll also have for Linux pretty sometimes soon.
Yeah.
But at that scale, the first one that I know of is what we're working on. But we do have a lot of interest in terms of some of the customers I talked about the financial reporting, they actually want to use DocumentDB. So if you saw in my the one slide that I showed, we look at from an operational workload to the analytical workload. We are trying to go across the spectrum. But then there may be cases where you need different kind of areas. So what I really want to outline, and then I'll actually take questions, or if there's anything more we can show demos, etc., is look, I want you to, why DocumentDB was actually purpose-built for these things, which is it's globally distributed from the ground up. So if you're looking at a cloud scale application on Azure, you have it. We are part of Azure Stack when Azure Stack releases, so it'll work for you from that standpoint too. Our claim is, look, as I was trying to explain, no trade-off necessary between all this interesting things that we talked about. Enabling you to use your familiar tools and framework, we'll continue to extend it, even in terms of the APIs and languages, fully managed and secure. We actually have a TCU paper published. I didn't want to have a TCU argument out here because it's a detailed paper that looks at open source NoSQL databases, DynamoDB, and us in terms of how we believe it differentiates. And then it's completely integrated with the Azure ecosystem with ADF, Azure Data Lake, tiered storage with support will come in. We have connectors for Azure Search. In a lot of scenarios where customers store data in DocumentDB and using Azure Search for certain search capabilities beyond query, Spark and SD Insight support. So that's what in a nutshell of DocumentDB is. I'm happy to take questions now. If there are things that you want us to show, we can show that. And I'm also happy to come and talk about in detail, I'm happy to go through a dev session, working on some of these aspects of it if there is any interest in that standpoint.
Attachments are interesting because you get that global replication that you don't get from storage. I mean, you do to some extent, but you don't get the kind of right capabilities, right? Do you have any, just quick, the cost, right? The blob storage is dirt cheap. But if I want my attachments to go along with my documents and gain all that global scale that you guys offer, how much more am I paying, to get that
Yeah, you stumped me on something that I'm, I think you pay for the attachment is the blob storage cost, right, Andy? Yeah, so there's no,
And RU-wise, like what's the impact, like percentage-wise?
from an RU-wise, the attachment processing is just a property within that particular document, the URI property, so you won't have any cost. It's the
Okay.
cost you pay for the storage.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm
Yeah,
wrong.
so what we do is, today, we used to provide a little bit more attachment storage. We found that a lot of people are misusing it. So what we have done is now that you can get a 2 GB of attachment storage across the whole account. But if you want to store more, let us know, we'll enable it, but you pay for that storage.
Sure.
So you said 2 GB is free, I mean, actually we cover it enough.
We cover it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So-
But there are more interesting aspects, like we do automatic backups, by the way. We didn't talk about it. We do automatic
Right.
backups in loading fashion, so you don't have to worry about it. You want to restore, call us.
Yeah, so we look at all of these,
Yeah.
managed services, we shouldn't
Yeah.
be talking about that, but yeah.
So you said you can have an attachment that's 2 gigabytes, basically?
No,
Total size.
total storage of so attachment, total storage of 2 gigabyte, we don't actually start running the meters. Beyond that, call us, we'll enable it, but it'll be a blob storage account, you pay for the blob
And that's,
storage.
you can have multiple attachments per document, I'm guessing?
Yes, you can.
You talked very briefly early on about the idea of a checkout system. What am I trying to say? A shopping cart. In a situation where you've got a widely distributed set of callers, is there a way to have them come into you talked about session consistency. Does that automatically route IP-based or whatever to a local connection and where the session is stored there? Am I making sense?
So, yes,
Sounds like I'm
Govind, you should correct me. So, if your application uses session consistency, in that particular example I was talking about, your application needs to be session aware, right? And because what basically says is it knows that I am the user, and I'm using from my computer,
Right.
Govind is using from there, and they're two different sessions. If you set session consistency from a database standpoint, what I was trying to explain is, me as a user, I don't actually think about the global order of what his transaction is. It is only about my global order, just preserving it.
Okay, so you're referring to session as like ASP.NET session
Correct,
per se?
yes, yeah.
Oh, I thought you were talking about there was something called session
No,
consistency.
no, what I meant is if you're
document
using
key.
something like an ASP.NET session, then for that kind of application, it's best to actually use the session consistency within the database. You just configure your database account to say use session consistency because your application is already aware of it. So it is in both sides, but the scenario I was talking about is the user session.
It's on the topic of sessions, one of the things I found confusing is you guys seem to own the starting of the session. Now, if I have a farm of servers where each request is going through to end servers in my API, it seems like I can set the session, but it doesn't seem like I'm the one who can establish the initial session identifier.
So what we do is, what we request for these kind of scenarios, and this is also equivalent for the mobile applications, right? The session has to travel all the way back to that end, that mobile or whichever application. So as long as you transfer it back, put in a header,
Yeah.
it will work for us. We just, so think of a session as nothing but when you start interacting with us, we just codify that this is the time, go and keep it. And I'm saying time, but it's a way to tell us that there is something happening underneath.
Right.
And you bring it next time, what all has changed? Let me give something which is related to it at this point in time. As long as you pull it back all the way to the client and send it back, we are.
Sure, right.
So both the scenarios.
Yeah, I only found it difficult because I can't choose that identifier myself, like give you a GUID that I make. It's
Yes, you
you
can.
guys actually
Yes,
make
we will
that,
do
and then I have to test it.
Yes. So these are the GitHub, so all our samples, everything is on GitHub, so please leverage it. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, I have a question about backups. I have a workload I'd like to move from SQL Azure, but the lack of having the backups, the point-in-time recovery like you have in SQL Azure is kind of blocking me. Do you have any advice for me about that?
So we should talk offline, we should
Okay.
definitely
So-
tell you where we are going with it, yeah?
Yeah, so we do have, we do have automatic backups.
Yes.
What you're talking about is we haven't actually enabled self-service or point-in-time recovery. That's a gap, that's what we haven't done. And as Govind said, we can talk about that in a bit.
So
You have a question, huh?
No, actually, I would like to add on to that. So yeah, a couple people have actually asked for this before, and one of the things that we do recommend is you kind of do a full backup, and then you can actually use our change feed to
Yeah, that's-
replay the actions until that point in time.
Go back with what tool?
So right now we have a mass ingestion tool, that's client side, that'll just
Okay.
suck out your data. And people have run that every day, kind of like a nightly job, and then they actually use the change feed to replay actions up to a certain point that they want
Okay.
to, or point in time, yeah.
Okay.
I think that's actually published as a,
As a sample, it
As a
might
sample,
be,
yeah.
yeah.
If not, we'll actually find that.
Alright.
So this is the TCO paper that we're talking about. So you can just search for TCO DocumentDB, and it covers both the VMs as well as the hosted systems. And this is, we are showing .NET, but if you are interested in Java, Node, Python, everything here. And yeah, so I think what you will definitely need is one more piece of information, which is, I guess, going to be your name, your email ID.
I actually have it in the beginning of the.
You have?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Let's go to the beginning of the day. Yeah, one of the, you can talk to any one of us. I mean, my name is Shyam Nair, Shyam.syan, will be your name, .kumar@kumr@microsoft.com. We can actually connect you with other folks too, if there are any questions. We do have a ask.tv@microsoft.com. One of the engineering teams that are very driven by the community and work with the community, so if there are any questions, let us know, we'll answer that.
How about integration for machine learning? I didn't see Azure ML on there. I saw Spark.
no, so we are integrated. So when I say integrated, so Azure ML basically can integrate with DocumentDB and can take up data from DocumentDB. So we are one of the few services, out of the box, we integrate with Azure Data Factory, Azure Search, Azure HD Insight, Azure ML, Power BI, pretty much all the services we have.
Clickstream, do you do like ad selection for clickstreams? Do you see people using it that way?
Yeah, so we have some of the customers, right? So what we do is we can ingest data very fast. So yes, there are customers who do that too.
How about log collection? Like
Log collection
replacing
people,
health stats?
yeah, so log collection people do, and that is just think of telemetry, right? In a way, it is log collection, right? What is happening at any given point of time, and because we can scale out very much, yes, we will use it. So there are a lot of these kind of scenarios: log collection, log analytics, customer 360, healthcare, logistics. We have customers who store logistics information, what is happening at any given point of time, state of the sites. Or we have healthcare folks who are using us.
Personalization, like a large bank, I mean, we're working with a few large banks in terms of personalization. Even the e-commerce vendor we talked about, the personalization of the website actually uses some of the real.
Do you know what standard the JavaScript you're on?
JavaScript, we can provide you the link, whatever the number is. Yes, but we can share that number.
If those are used as a stored procedure, can you version them?
Stored procedure, so it's a very good question. I think we should definitely have a session around that. But stored procedure, the way we do is like we can help you how to version them. Okay, we don't have versions like 1, 2, 3 version. We don't store. We just store one stored procedure. So you would rather have 2 copies, one in your source code management system, another one here. When you upload it, you just say this is what it is. So we don't have inbuilt version system.
Does VS or VS Code integrate with stored procedure development?
VS definitely does that. Yes, because it's just JavaScript. VS Code I haven't verified.
I don't think
there is VS Code direct integration.
You said that you're gonna have encryption at rest soon?
Yes.
Does that include the attachments? Because they're in pop storage?
So,
Yeah,
doesn't support encryption.
Blob supports encryption,
Yeah, so then,
So it's just automatically, if your document DB is set up to be encrypted at rest, then your attachments would be as well.
I have, so the storage, yes, yeah, we'll use encrypted storage, yeah.
So you don't have to do anything specific. This is completely transparent.
So, like, the key management is customer can change, like, the consumer can change the key, or
So,
is it
great
only
question.
document?
In the beginning, we are going with Microsoft's keys, but
Yeah.
over a period of time, we
So
come.
we will actually, what gets released or what we roll out in the next month or actually starting now is, it will be service managed keys, but we will also have customer managed keys and key vault integration as part of the next one.
How do people manage sub-schema permissions? So you only want a Tableau user to see part of the schema?
Right now, yeah, sub-schema permissions, honestly, yeah, we have, because we provide up to 2 megabytes of documents, we've not seen many customers ask for it. But yes, if there are more, send us a mail at ask.db, and we will be able to see what best we can do. We don't have something out of the box.
Sure. Are you
So
planning on?
you can have permissions at document.
At document level, we
Yeah,
can do,
you
so,
you can
yeah.
actually manage.
Nobody is asking at
Yeah,
within a
you
document.
can't, within a document.
Within a document.
Do you have a schema discovery tool?
We do not have something published outside, but we are thinking of it.
The underlying kind of, the infrastructure and how ODBC is done is through basically schema management. So what happens is basically random sampling of your documents, you build out the schema. I think we actually do have plans to expose the actual internal schema we store. I think that might be within the next couple of months. Yeah.
Did you just say that it was 2 megabytes was the maximum document
Yes,
size?
yes.
Okay.
Gigabytes.
No, the document itself.
Documents.
Sorry.
So can you like do joins across collections, like if I have some metadata in one collection and if I have my actual data in another collection?
Not today, not today.
So we talked about in terms of the complex, some of this join side, that's probably where you would actually, the question earlier in terms of where you would consider a relational database.
Or denormalize your connection.
Yeah, that's one of the patterns we have actually seen is denormalizing, and we actually, the scenario is in terms of working with a customer who is using Hadoop-based system, and then they wanted to store in a data mart, and they are trying to use DocumentDB as a data mart. They're doing the proof of concept where they denormalize because.
Do you have a schema validation tool?
Schema validation, so we are first of all schema less.
Schema agnostic, right? So
We don't
from
have-
that standpoint, there is no.
Can you plug it in? You know,
No, not today, not today. But we have, one of our strengths is no schema required. And we will, so the point is, there are a lot of other document stores, but they require you to have a schema. And that becomes challenging because evolution becomes a problem. So first we said, let us address that. And over a period of time, if there is a lot of demand, we can definitely, because that's just an addition. Yeah.
Oh, so you have your event stream now. Did you guys are already working on support for Azure functions so that?
We already have it.
We do?
Yeah, we do have support.
So
for
one of
that.
the, how should I say diplomatically, how should I, somebody who manages animal food. Yeah. So we are working, so they are deployed it using Azure functions. So that's
I didn't get what you Yes, we do have the answer against it. Yes, sir.
So like, let's say I have a data set which is like, I can't figure out a partition mechanism. Let's say I have a list of bunch of IP address, right, like millions of IP addresses. But maybe I have, like each IP address can map to a geolocation, so you can partition by location and all. But the query is done based on IP addresses, right? So, but how do you partition it? Because IP addresses, I mean, they're all unique, right?
So we can, yeah, so we can take that today, night, now, or we can contact offline.
So, yeah, we can have, so one of the things is, I may make sure I got the question right in terms of, even if the IP address, you use a geolocation tag to that in terms of, and you could use that as your partitioning strategy because that doesn't actually impact your query. As long as you're distributing it as across a partition set of partition databases, your query, everything we ingest, we actually index. So you could query based on IP address too.
But does it help? I mean, because I'm partitioning based on location.
Do you want to, so it's, the way to think of partitioning is, how do you want to ingest data versus how do you want to query. If all your queries are going to be using partitioning, your query is going to use that IP address, then better partition it by IP
Yes.
address. We are
Yeah.
we will scale out to millions of partition keys.
So
We
that's
are,
what
don't choose very less partition keys, so don't have 26 characters of the.
We have
alphabet,
seen
because that is not gonna work.
an example of, we had an issue with a customer actually who had provisioned a lot of throughput, lot of throughput, but was actually getting throttled because the partition key was date. And on that particular day, like, all the other partitions are actually, it's nothing happening and they just push data into one.
So this is the IT problem actually.
So partitioning is not directly related to the RUs, right?
Partitioning is related to RU in terms of when we create a collection, there is a partition key. Why? When you partitions have equal number of RUs. So that's the reason. Each partition has equal number of RUs. So when you design your queries, make sure that you choose a good one.
Yeah.
So like if I have millions of partitions, so.
Doesn't matter. We'll help. We are very happy to have millions of partitions, not less number of partitions. Yeah.
Do you have any white papers on partition strategies, for example, completely random partitions?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
So we have some modeling.
Shirish from our team actually has, we have a data modeling documentation that talks about it, and then in many cases we've actually actively worked with these individual customers and looked at the data and actually helped them, but we do have a
Get to that. Just check. Yes. So if you search
Can you email that to me?
DocumentDB, so that's DocumentDB, Shirish. Yeah, and partition. The one is. This is one, okay? This will give you as much of information about partitioning and what is the right. This video will help you a lot. Then there is a modeling that we have. So you can also look at how to model this. Yeah, so the development part, we have best practices, and there is a model part. Yeah, next question please, while I search. So this will have a lot of the things.
Okay.
So quick question for me in terms of, because I wasn't aware of how many of you knew, is this the level that you were expecting, or you wanted to go more deeper, you wanted to go higher level?
Actually, as a developer, I would be more comfortable if you spend more time on actual APIs and queries and what it actually
We
offers.
can do that, yeah.
And then on top of that, all this scaling, global, blah, blah,
Yeah.
Especially, we first need to see the value, what we can do with it, what kind of stuff
We
we
just
can
wanna get the
store, how
documents, yeah.
easy. And then comes the question of,
Yeah, that's
oh,
good.
it's good, and then we scale. But you actually just a few slides, just a few minutes at the end. Very briefly.
Entity framework. Is there any plans, or is
It's
that
the devil.
fully a SQL thing?
I agree with
forever
you
and ever?
I think you have to take that one.
It's not something that we, I don't want to make politically incorrect statements.
It's kind of not necessary because with NoSQL, you start with the objects.
Not,
You don't have to do it the other way around. So,
I actually like the level, I'm not interested in sitting for a bunch of code walkthroughs, so I sit the other way around.
What I think is one of, because I wasn't sure how many folks are familiar, but, if there is interest, I can work with Chris.
We can work again
We
for
can do it much more deeper, into walk through code, show samples. That's how some of the sessions that I've done before, and then I was looking at and said I wasn't sure if I go through code and then the questions come about backup and restore and all the other aspects of it, and I wanted to take it a level higher and talk about why did we end up building this. But happy to come back and have a chat about it in detail. I'm also happy to, in terms of there are other avenues where you want to get together, a few of, even if it is, I don't know, if we don't get time till July or June, and if it's a weekend, you want any one of us to come and talk, we are happy to come and do that.
Selfish, but .NET and JSON.NET, you guys are like super married to it.
Yes.
And you have some built-in things that are not under control right now, like ID, right, like controlling the ID. Is that, I think it was up in here to be fixed, where are we with that, because it kind of.
We will come back to you, but yeah, JSON, if you're talking about Newtonsoft and
Yeah,
friends,
like you guys are married.
we are married, yeah.
The-
No divorce possible.
The global instance, no less.
Yes. So we are very closely married to each other. I don't know what that means, but yeah, it is something that we rely on them, and if there are certain issues, let us know. Send a mail at ask.db@microsoft.com. We will help you.
Do you have level training in something like Channel 9 or your virtual university?
MBA, do you want
So
to?
we have Microsoft Virtual Academy where, and we do have, we do what is called as Azure Friday things. We can actually, based on specific topics, we can go into details, but we do have some of them.
Can you run this on-prem?
So good, sorry, I didn't talk about that in terms of, so not for production, we do have an emulator that actually supports both DocumentDB as well as the Mongo head. So if you are really looking at dev test and get the entire service experience, it's a high fidelity emulator that actually works and feels like a DocumentDB. One separation, one difference, it's not a globally distributed, like partitions, but no global distribution. And we are also actively working on making it enable in a container, so you can use that. It's not a production, it has its own little UI to actually browse through the application. That's a demo. Again, from a coding standpoint, that's one of the things that I would have started off with showing
And
them.
my next question is going to be if you have an image in Docker Hub to run it on-prem.
Yes, so we will, yeah, go ahead.
The emulator will be available in a Docker container soon. I don't think, in the next couple of weeks, I don't think it went out yet.
Not yet, not
Yeah,
yet.
we are a very small team. The reason I look around, like, we're a very small team, like startups, so not all of these things are planned and I don't have it up there, so stock, yeah. So we'll have that, and then from a production on-premises standpoint, our path is Azure Stack, which is the Azure appliance, I don't know if we can call that appliance, but the Azure footprint on your premises, and we'll be part of that.
Is there tooling like Azure Storage Explorer?
So the Azure emulator, actually, when you install the Azure emulator, there is a similar to the experience you get in terms of browsing and querying in the portal, you'll actually get a local experience from the emulator itself. We are actively looking at how we integrate with Azure Storage Explorer as well as with the Visual Studio ecosystem as such.
Right now we have this Azure DocumentDB Studio, which you can.
Right, we also have the Azure Document. But if you're using the emulator, I would use the emulator user experience.
To access it from C#, do you have a link kind of thing?
We do have link support.
Yes, link is default. It's default. Link, SQL, Lambda.
And how you do, but you have to then specify schema.
So you can specify, so you can do all that. So let us say, I think we should do it offline. I think he's waiting.
Yeah, well, no, it's just today, last question, so we can kind of wrap things up. If you guys want to ask one-on-one questions afterwards, go for it.
So all our, everything about our query mechanism, whether it is link, whether it's SQL, everything is over here. So you can see that we have pretty comprehensive information here for you to look at. It will take some time. So we have everything. And with we just released February 27th, Java 6 support. Any Java developers? No? No question. But yes, so we have Java 6 support.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much, but we are here if you want any questions. As I said, the email address was there on the board. Please.